The member for Gippsland East.
Thank you very much, Acting Speaker, and it's a pleasure to rise on the Conservation, Forests and Lands Amendment Bill. And I'll start off by saying, as has been reflected by our earlier speakers, we won't be opposing this bill in the Assembly, but we will be reserving our position in the upper house to address some of the areas of concern that I want to outline here. Now, a key part of this bill, as we've heard, is to give the Minister and the Departmental Secretary discretionary powers under the Code of Practice for Timber Production, which would make those decisions legally binding. Now, this is concerning to us, and I want to take up why. Now, it will be good to have this level of discretion if we can get some guarantees that it will clear the obstacles and the hurdles that are currently confronting our timber industry around court injunctions on coops and the like that put hard-working, honest timber families out of their lawful work. But it's got the potential to be used to, I guess, further impede the sector, to be used the other way. And I want to make a few comments, Acting Speaker, about going back to the Code of Practice for Timber Harvesting and Timber Production and the basis and the ethos for it. Now, it was established acknowledging that the timber industry has environmental impacts. We chop trees down. Absolutely it does. It has environmental impacts. But the code was put in place to ensure that this didn't occur in areas of high sensitivity. It's about enabling a practical and economically viable industry to undertake what it does, and also at the same time minimising the environmental impacts. It's a really sensible, balanced compromise. That's what it is. Now, the concern that we have is giving the Minister or the Secretary these discretionary powers is that rulings may be biased, has the potential to be biased towards the environmental sector and make it more difficult for the industry to prevail. And everybody knows the challenges that they've got at the moment. And the problem is that this Timber Code of Practice that was established to give some clarity and some certainty to the timber industry, we have some who want to use it as a tool to impact the timber industry, which was not its intention. It should be an enabling code of practice. Now, these additional powers have the extension to be that, to be problematic to the timber industry. Now, we've heard some commentary, including in the second reading speech, that the bushfires of 2019-20 created irreversible damage, and that could be something that the minister or the departmental secretary uses to use their discretionary powers. Now, the fires that we had in 2019-20, I know a little bit about them, lived through them. We've had worse plenty of times before. We have had worse than that plenty of time before. And it is a fact that our landscape has been recovering from these types of events for a very long time. So to say it's caused irreversible damage makes the suggestion that it hasn't happened before. It has, and the bush has recovered. Now, the irony that I find with all this is we have a government that won't control fuel loads in the bush. We could see this coming. The locals forecast the 2019-20 fires a couple of years before, as soon as we got a hot summer and lightning strikes. We've got a government that doesn't control fuel loads in the bush, allows record fuel loads to build up, and then is giving itself legislation where it can invoke measures to impact the timber industry as a result of their mismanagement of the bush. It is a vicious circle of total mismanagement. Now, I want to talk about the timber harvesting itself and the footprint of the timber harvesting. We have the Greens that come in and stand up in here, and you would think we were bulldozing the entire country. No idea. The timber industry operates in 6% of our state forests, 6% of our bush. The timber industry operates in that. And Acting Speaker, of that 6%, now just get your head around this, per annum, 0.04% is harvested. The 6% is harvested on an 80-year rotation. And they want to come in here and jump up and down about all the destruction it's causing and the horrible things. It is an absolute minuscule amount that we're harvesting. And on top of that, it's worth remembering, and one thing we do agree on both sides of the chamber here, is no old growth is logged. What we need to do as a parliament is accept that there is some environmental impacts from logging. There are, but it's an absolutely minuscule area, and it supports an industry that is important to not only the Victorian economy, but we've got organisations like Planet Ark, for instance, running around. Their slogan at the moment is "Do the world some good, build it with wood." Do the world some good, build it with wood. Planet Ark. So we've got one of the most highly regulated timber industries in the world here in this state. We've got Planet Ark telling us to build with timber because it's one of the most environmentally sustainable building products. We've got a government over here that's shutting it down, and the government over here cannot tell me, when we're shutting down our native timber industry, hardwood timber industry, to go to plantation. No one on this side of the chamber can tell me where the plantations of hardwood are to replace it in 2030. Now, consumer demand of this product is going up because timber captures carbon. Timber is sustainable. Timber is renewable. And we've got this government closing it down, saying we're going to replace it with plantation. Where's the plantation timber? Well, hardwood takes 30 years to mature at the earliest time, 30 to 50 years. So if we're transitioning out of hardwood by 2030, those plantations should be sitting here somewhere in Victoria that are 20 years old now. But they're not there. There is no foresight. And we're talking about 0.04% per annum of our bush. This is just a circus. And you've got the Greens who come in here and say that the timber industry, quoting studies to say the timber industry worsens the fire risk. They are selective in what they quote. The University of Tasmania also released a study after the 2019-20 fires to say timber harvesting has no impact on the severity of fire impact. But do we hear the member for Melbourne getting up talking about the University of Tasmania report? Nope. No. I actually sat down and had a cup of tea with one of the Greens probably about 18 months ago in this place to try and get... No, I did. Because I thought I'd try and get the rationale behind their stance on the timber industry. And when I asked some of these questions, we're highly regulated, it's a good building product, it captures carbon, it's renewable, it's sustainable, I couldn't get any answers. They had no answers. I'm not sure about that. But they want to get up here when they get their 90 seconds, or they want to stand up in here when they get on a bill and they want to talk about possums and all that sort of stuff, and we do need to protect the bush, we do. But the Timber Harvesting Code of Practice has identified the areas where there are minimal environmental impacts. The member from Melbourne stood up in here before and said this could be used to allow logging in illegal areas. What a load of rubbish. It'll allow logging in areas that have been identified for logging, potentially, if it's not used the other way around. But my concern sits with the fact that these discretionary powers are going to sit with a government that wants to ban a sector. So my concern is that they will use it, dare I say it, for evil rather than good, because they want to get rid of the timber industry. And where are we going to get our timber from when they get rid of our native Victorian hardwood?
Order.
The Greens will be standing out the front.
Member for Gippsland East, sorry to interrupt you, but the time has come for me to interrupt business for the matter of public importance, and I ask the clerk to ring the bells.
Speaker, I was just coming to my crescendo when we had to go on to the MPI, but the point I was making was that the Greens in this chamber who want to close down and hate this timber industry, they'll be the ones that are on the steps campaigning that we're importing timber from countries with less oversight. That's what they'll be doing, saying that we're killing the orangutan. This is an industry that needs support. These are families, these are people in our communities who need to be able to go about their lawful jobs without being impeded. And that's what I would hope this legislation ends up doing, supporting the timber industry to go about its business and not be used by the government to provide more impediments to this sector, because at the end of the day this Labor government is also intending to close down our native timber industry, but these families need support not only for the long term but in the short term, and we will be considering amendments between houses to enshrine that in the legislation, that it's used for good purposes, not bad.